Okay, thank you very much everyone, and welcome to everyone attending this meeting of the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board. After a year, you'd think I'd be able to say it. Just to remind everyone that the meeting is being webcast, and there is a link on the meeting webpage if anyone would like to go back and watch any of it. For the benefit of the members of the public watching the webcast, members of the Scrutiny Board are going to introduce themselves to you now. But before we do that, if I can just remind people that these microphones are directional. So if you can just make sure that you are, rather than looking at the person who's asked the question or you're asking the question to, if you can look towards the microphone just so that we can make sure it picks up people's voices, that would be ideal. And of course, please mute your microphone once you're done. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Asghar Ali for Gipton and Hare Hills.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Katie Dykill in Beacon Seacroft.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Andrew Scotes from Beeson Holbeck Ward.
Hello, Councillor Kate Haig, Farnham Wortley.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Sonia Layton, Guiseley and Rawdon.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Michael Miller, Kippix and Matthew Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Mohammed Shazad, Mortown and Meanwood Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Sandy Lay, Otley and Yeadon Ward.
Good morning, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Neil Buckley, Old Woodley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Mutton, Ali, Gipton and Hare Hills.
And I also should have said I'm Hannah Bithell, Councillor for Kirkstall. And Becky?
Hi, Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
Lovely, thank you. Becky, can you run through agenda items 1 to 5, please?
Agenda item 1, Chair appeals. There are no appeals against refusal of inspection documents. Item 2, we've got no exclusions today. Item 3, no late items of business. Item 4, can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with our Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. And item 5, apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Wilson, and we've got Councillor Haig attending as a substitute, and Councillor Robinson and Councillor Stevenson is attending as a substitute. We've also had apologies from the Executive Member, Councillor Pryor.
Thank you. Item number 6 is the minutes, and it's to approve the minutes as a correct record from the 5th of March. It's worth noting that on minute 71, the additional information requested by the Scrutiny Board was circulated on the 4th of April, if you want to look back at it. Are we happy to agree the minutes? Can someone propose? And that's Katie. And somebody to second. Councillor Scopes, thank you. And finally, before we get into our substantive items, number 7, the work programme. Becky, are you happy to take us through this, please?
I am, Chair. If members could just consider the draft work schedule for 25-26. It currently reflects known items of business, so performance, budget monitoring, alongside items that have been requested by the Scrutiny Board during this year, or which have been referred to you by the Executive Board. As Councillor Bithell said in the pre-meet, where members have expressed a particular area of interest through your one-to-ones, those have also been picked up in that draft. If members would recommend any changes to the current schedule, please let me know. An updated version of this schedule will be presented to the successor board in June for them to consider and provide a view on. So it's at the moment just to recommend to the successor board rather than a definite approval.
Does anyone have any comments? No? I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you guys for engaging with the one-to-ones. It was really interesting to have that time and to be able to then see patterns amongst you all of what sort of things we needed to put on. It was a really valuable experience for me as chair. So thank you for taking time out of your days in order to do that. We will move on now to item number 8, which is the Future Talent Plan. This report sets out an overview of activity covered by the Future Talent Plan over the last 12 months. It also highlights actions planned for the next year. One of the key areas of interest for this board has been employment and skills support for care leavers, and I'm therefore delighted to have Bill Jones with us today representing Luminate, who are doing some really, really interesting work. We'll start with introductions of the officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Fiona Bolam, Interim Chief Officer for Economy and Skills.
Thank you. Gillian Wallace, Head of Employment and Skills.
And Bill Jones, the Deputy CEO of the Luminate Education Group and the Principal of Leeds City College as part of that group.
Thank you. Fiona, are you happy to make some introductory comments?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Gillian has just got a very short presentation and it is literally 3 slides. So as she's getting that up, I'll just say, I'll cover some background and context on the Future Talent Plan. What I'm not going to do is highlight the key activities as these are in the report and there will be questions that. Gillian's going to give you a very short overview of the next 12 months, including some changes for the service. And Bill will introduce some of the work of Luminate, that Luminate Group are doing to deliver on the Future Talent Plan. So thank you, Gillian. Thank you. So the Future Talent Plan was launched in 2022 following very extensive consultation. We were able to track contributions from across the city for various different geographic places. So we know that there was a contribution from every single ward. We were able to track by various characteristics as well. We also had individual meetings across the city.
Sorry, Fiona, are you all right to just move the microphone a little closer to you? We're struggling to hear. Thank you.
Apologies for that. Yes, so just very briefly then, we launched in 2022. We had some great consultation. We were able to see that we had contributions from every single ward in the city. We had individual meetings with businesses, business representative organisations, education and the voluntary sector. We were guided by a steering group, and that included employer organisations, the Chamber of Commerce, CBI. We had higher education, further education and schools as part of that. So it was pretty comprehensive. The Future Talent Plan itself, it sets out our collective ambition and brings our city partners together to deliver. And it enables the city to coalesce around 2 very clear objectives, which are around supporting our people and businesses to thrive and aligning the city's education and training infrastructure. It guides our response to both opportunities and challenges faced by people and businesses in Leeds. And it guides the work of the Employment and Skills Service, and it brings city partners together to deliver. It helps us work with residents so they can develop the skills that they need for work and helps businesses access the talent pool we have in the city for growth. The report is an overview of the activity from the past 12 months and it highlights those actions that we're taking now to take this forward.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm just going to speak very quickly about what the next 12 months for the employment and skills infrastructure may look like and some of the key influences that will affect our work. As Fiona's already mentioned, the report has got lots of examples where the Employment and Skills Service has delivered, commissioned and seek to influence provision in this space. And it's fair to say that the employment and skills infrastructure is quite complex, and it's not just about local authority delivery, but also about very much working in partnership. And as we go into the next 12 months, I think that's going to be even more important. And as we see an increase in role of the regional mayor, which is defined by the devolution white paper, and the opportunities that will bring, it's even more important that we garner a team leads approach so that we can see the benefits from there. There is going to be some challenges in delivery, as we would expect, with particular challenges around budget reductions and an increase of delivery costs, not just for the LA, but also for the employment and skills infrastructure. And it really brings home the importance of us working together if we are going to address them. The Employment Hub, which is an LA-led employment support service, needs to respond to need and needs to intervene where it can add most value. And what we've seen from the intelligence is a real increase in the number of people that are out of work for increasingly complex reasons, including health. So that means that our employment hub must respond to that and develop a service that helps support people with health conditions and where there may be more complex support. That said, there is lots of opportunities for growth in Leeds, and it's more important than ever that the Future Talent Plan allows us to respond to those opportunities and focuses on economic growth in key sectors such as the finance and the professional service, health and digital. It's not just about what we can do as the LA. We're very lucky in Leeds to have some fantastic partners that support us in the delivery of the plan and own it just as much as we do. And that's one of the reasons why we've invited Bill along today. And the next and final slide is just an opportunity to highlight some of the work that Luminate Group have done in contributing towards what we're trying to achieve with this plan.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me, Councillor Blithell. I think further education's always been about skills. It's always been about employers. But I think it did lose its way a little about 10 years ago, where there was too much focus on qualifications and Ofsted grades and too little consideration of what colleges traditionally did to contribute to the local economy, employers' skills needs. It's internationally known that skills leads to economic growth, which is what the country is crying out for. So we were delighted when the government at the time started changing the narrative around what the skills sector was about, and we aligned our curriculum strategy to the Leeds Inclusive Growth Plan from about 2019, and then it had added impetus with the Future Talent Plan from about 2021, 2022. So we've worked really hard to try to make our departments align with what is in that growth plan, as well as in the wider regional growth plan and the industrial strategy nationally. So, for example, we've set up a new department at our Printworks campus, just down Hunslet Road, in sustainable technology, where we'll be looking at the zero carbon skills for the future, and we're embedding those sorts of skills and digital skills throughout the whole curriculum, as well as employability skills. And more recently, I'll be brief, we've set up we've set up 2 new boards that are part of our governing body infrastructure, where we have an employer board for Leeds City College, and as well as a stakeholder board where we look at future trends, the strategic horizon, with people like the combined authority, the local authority, the employer representative bodies. And the employer body group, which its first meeting for Leeds as a separate entity will be in the next month, and we've got representatives from 13 of the 15 subject sector areas that there are in the region. So we think it's a really positive move to sort of stimulate growth in the city and beyond.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful, and thank you for being brief. I've got quite cutthroat with my slide elements, just for those on the board. Okay, I'm going to open it to questions from members. Councillor Scopes.
Yeah, super. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming today. Really, really positive report to read. I've got 2 questions, if that's all right. So obviously there's loads of good work in here, but it's difficult in my head, to understand how we're doing overall as a city without benchmarking, and see how we're doing compared to others. And a lot of the numbers are big numbers, 20,000 here, 1,000 there, but it's hard to get a context of how many people we're reaching out of the people we need to. So I don't know if you can give us any context around that. And the second thing is more around looked after children. So as a city, we declared looked after as a protected characteristic, I think it was last year, which I thought was really important. I know the Bill and the Illuminate Group has done a lot of work on working with looked after children, which isn't in this paper. So I'd be quite keen to just, if he could just expand on that, I think that'd be really helpful, because I think that's really important to our overall offering, particularly as us councillors, all corporate parents too, all looked after children. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you very much.
If I come back on your second point, and if I ask Gillian to respond on the first, I'll come back on looked after children. So I'm a member of the Care Experience as a Protected Characteristic Board, and I coordinate the group that meets around employment and skills. So I convene that group for the city, for the council, sorry. So we are bringing together, we are looking at what we can do as a council ourselves for care experience people, what we can do as a service, and then what we can do through our city partnerships, including Leeds Anchors with organisations like Leeds City College. So in terms of the work that is happening with the council itself, so a lot of that has been led by HR, and they are looking into work experience. They are looking into can guaranteed job interviews happen for care experience young people, and they're looking at staff networks and how they can get a staff network together for people who are care experienced as well. For our employment and skills service, we're looking at similar. So we're looking at what we do through our services, how can we change and adapt some of our events. So ahead of the apprenticeship fair, we held a briefing and we encouraged personal assistants and others to attend, and we got out the messages out through there, so we were able to give people a really good flavour of what would be at that event, because I think we'd previously been asked, can you do something specific for care leavers, but we worried about the quality of the event that we would get, so we want to put a wrapper of support around people so they're actually able to benefit most from that. In terms of work experience ourselves, so I have spoken to my colleagues in city development, and we are looking to do something specific of experience of work for young people who are care experienced. This is at a very early stage at the moment, and if that model works, what I'd quite like to do is to do that across the council, and I'm speaking to children's services around that. And then I have raised this as an issue at every employer forum that I attend. So I have done this at the city's digital forum. I have mentioned it at Anchors, and Bill and I are taking a separate presentation in June to the main Anchors network around this to highlight what's been done, but also to give a bit of a challenge actually as to what else and how can we raise our ambition here. And I would like to also mention the Leeds Business Anchors, which is a small anchor network of private sector businesses, and they are developing a model. They are going to offer work experience for a small number of care experienced young people, partnering with Leeds City College around that, and that is going to take place this summer. And those young people will spend a day in 5 of the businesses, and that includes people like Burberry, Adelshaw Goddard, which are a legal firm, Arup, and what we'd like to do is evaluate that model and see how that works, and then and if that works, actually encourage more people to work in this way. And that's the model we're going to follow for city development as well to do this. So it is absolutely on our agenda, and we'll continue to work on our action plan, particularly in employment and skills, to see what else that we can do around this. So we take it seriously that this is these are looked after young people, and this is the family firm. Okay, thank you.
I think you've got a very valid point around the data with employment and skills, and by way of explanation, employment and skills data is incredibly complex, and there has been an issue over the last 12 months about the data that we receive from the ONS and the reliability of it that's made it quite hard for us to report back with real accuracy. There's a couple of areas where I think we could improve how we report on the data. One is around letting you know exactly what the Employment and Skills Service is doing in that areas and where we are having interventions. We do record that, and you're quite right, we've probably not shared that in the depth that's needed in this report. To give you some reassurance, we are looking at our final figures for the end of last financial year of having direct interventions with around 12,000 people. Some of which is around supporting people into work, some of it which will include our major events, which is supporting people with careers advice and support, and some of which is around skills development. So we can absolutely break that down further. We don't track the interventions of all of our partners on the Future Talent Plan. That's not something we do at the moment, but it's certainly something we can consider going forward and reporting back on next year, and we can take that forward and speak to our partners about what key performance data are they able to share with ourselves. And we can provide a data pack on some of the key performance indicators that we look at, such as the employment rate, such as the skills rates of our residents, and compare that to core cities, which is probably our closest comparator. I just heavily caveat it with the moment is that the source of the data, there is a warning that's been issued by ONS on that, but we're hopeful that that will be removed soon and we can have the confidence in what that's showing us.
Thank you. I wonder if it would be worth us, we've spoken previously about looking at the KPIs that come to the board. I wonder if there's a piece of work for us to do around what KPIs are coming from the employability stuff. So perhaps that can form the basis of a recommendation as well to come out of this. Bill, I just wonder whether you want to come in as well on that other question about care leavers.
I was going to come in on the other question around, I mean, one of the advantages of being as large as we are is the scale, is that we've got our own labour market intelligence team, and we analyse each sector in terms of the needs, the vacancies, the trends, and we're quite happy to share, and we've produced a report on each sector, and we're quite happy to share that, and we'll work with Gillian on that, and I know the combined authority do similar as well, so we need to avoid duplicating and sort of tie it up a bit. I think it's probably worth mentioning here, though, that whatever the need is, we can't meet the demand. So there's two reasons. We haven't got enough accommodation within the city to meet the demand, and also some of the funding streams are limited. So we try to stimulate growth in apprenticeships, in higher education, loan-funded provision. Young people, you get the money eventually. So we are growing and seeking to meet the demand there. But where the thing we're talking about with the adult skills budget, there are restrictions on that. So we have waiting lists, we have queues. So whatever the need is, we can't meet it. So that is a real issue. And the government have announced that they've just reduced the adult education budget by a further 3.3%, which seems absurd to me when it's the one thing that we know leads to economic growth. But perhaps I'm being too political. Don't know.
You can, Councillor Scopes.
Yeah, probably more of a comment. So I think that follow-up date would be really helpful from both of you. And yeah, that's really concerning around the waiting list. And I think it's something maybe we should also add as a recommendation because, for example, I know there's a wood recycling CIC in my ward, and they did this programme where you do this apprenticeship and you end up with a certificate that says you can work on a building site, but you go through some carpentry skills, basic carpentry skills, working in a warehouse, working with others. And we did with Community Committee, we did this project where we got a number of people with this certificate, which meant they could go on to employment. And it's that sort of thing and the sort of things you're talking about, Bill, that really make a difference. And so that funding, in terms of economic growth, it feels like it's massively important. So, yeah, thank you, Chair.
Is that something that the board would like us to write to the government on? Is that what I will do is I'll speak to the exec member and see if they would like to co-sign it as well, if there's agreement from the entire board. Yeah? Okay. Further questions then. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Page 24. At the top of the page under paragraph 3, the Leeds unemployment rate stands, it is June 2024 of course, stands at 1.9%. Now that figure infers that 98.1% of people are at work, but this is clearly not the case, is it? And what puzzles me is the average unemployment rate across the core cities was 4.7, West Yorkshire averaged 3.3, Yorkshire and Humber regional rate at 3, and the UK average stood at 3.7. So 1.96 is way out of kilter and would infer that Leeds was a hotbed of wage inflation because there weren't any jobs and so forth. And I just wonder whether this has got something to do, well, it must have, with this economically inactive situation where you have people saying that they've got mental health problems and depression and so forth, leaving aside the the facts about that. Could you comment on this rate and what is the percentage that's actually correct?
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. So that is the rate that we've got. That is the ONS rate. So that there. But as Gillian said, some of this is caveated around that there are some issues at the moment. We do know that unemployment in Leeds is low at the moment. And yes, inactivity rates have gone up for Leeds. So we know that is an issue. And that is part of the reasoning behind actually pivoting some of the service towards supporting people who are inactive going forward. But that rate is correct and published by ONS.
Well, this just seems remarkable. It seems unbelievable. So what's the figure in Leeds for the economically inactive? What does that differ? How does that alter the percentage?
Yeah, I could come in with a little bit more information of there. Certainly that's one of the challenges that we've got, is that while we have low unemployment, which is where people are economically inactive, so if they are out of work, they're actively looking for work, we do have increasing rates of people that are economically inactive, and that's for a variety of reasons. Some people that are economically inactive will be in full-time education. So we see that as a positive reason, particularly if they're in kind of further education and higher education. But increasingly, the data is showing us that people are economically inactive due to health conditions. And that's why we need to pivot our employment hub support to help tackle that and join up the health support and employment support system more effectively to get more people into work. And that's going to involve working with employers as well as working with individuals, and accepting that health conditions that people have are real, and we need to understand how we can adjust the workplace to help support people with health conditions as well. In economically inactive due to health reasons, Leeds does track slightly below the Yorkshire figure and also the national figure, but we are seeing increases in the younger age group as well. This is not a blip in the data, it's a sustained increase, and we really need to intervene and make that a priority for the next 12 months and further.
Just in terms of economically inactive, the two groups that we're seeing is the biggest increase is in young people, and that tends to relate to mental health. But in terms of absolute highest numbers, it's in people over 50, and it's not necessarily around mental health. It is around things like musculoskeletal as well, and a lot of that is related to certain occupations and occupational sectors too.
I'm just going to use Chair's prerogative and sneak in here because I've got a question that's on the same theme, so it makes sense to ask that at the same time. And I just wonder, on page 27, 4.2, it talks about the work that you can do around the health conditions and long-term sick, economically inactive folk. And I just wondered if we've got any indication on how the changes in industry are impacting people's ability to get back into work with the sort of the more digitalisation, the potential for greener jobs, etc. Is there now more opportunity for people to be able to, in some health conditions, get back into work?
So thank you, Councillor Bithell. We have not done the work around that, but actually increasing jobs in those service areas and increasing jobs that are digital, whilst we do need to make sure that people have got the right skills, and that's part of the work that the Employment and Skills Service does. So, yeah, growing those jobs there, and actually, fewer jobs that need that manual sort of side, I think will, but that is going to be something I think that is long term, and I think the important thing for us will be supporting people to make sure they've got the right skills so they can access those kind of roles.
Thank you. Councillor Layton?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I think the breadth of the curriculum at Leeds City College is amazing. I asked a similar question to this a little while back. I'm not sure if I got a response to it, so I want to ask it again. And it's about, perhaps this will be a funding issue, but a lot of our post-16 education seems to be centred in the city centre. And obviously the Leeds City College is all the campuses in Leeds City Centre. Maybe there's some outside of that, I'm not entirely sure. So my question is are there any plans to localise post-16 education so that people can retrain locally if they wanted to? Back in the day, people used to do night college, things like that locally. That seems to have gone away a little bit, so I'm just interested in people's thoughts on that.
I suppose it depends on which age group we're talking about. So for 16 to 18-year-olds, we find that if you want to provide the best facilities in the most cost-effective way, the city centre is the best place because it's accessible. All the buses direct there, and it doesn't make sense to put expensive engineering plant machinery out in a suburb. That said, for adult education, there was a long tradition. Leeds City College would have had 30, 40 sites around the city and all sorts, and we're down to about 6 or 7. Adult education budget was halved between 2010 and 2020, so that is the reason. And it's continuing to drop, so it's unlikely to return anytime soon, even though I believe it's incredibly effective and it's the best way to get people into first steps learning, and they're more likely to progress onto longer, higher level technical courses if they have those first step opportunities.
If I could just add a bit of detail there as well. In adult education, the tailored learning provision in the city, which is primarily delivered by the local authority, is in community bases. So that's very much first step provision, where we work with community-led partners to deliver that activity. And part of that is around supporting people to access the college facilities. So we will look at things like travel plan as part of the progression pathways. So we'll engage them very much in this is first step provision back into education for adults, but also looking at progression and how can we help them access the further provision that the college and the universities provide, including looking at travel. In the post-16 space, the report does reference that Leeds was able to benefit from some additional funding from the DFE. And what we've been able to do is work with a range of independent training providers. So some of that funding has gone to the Luminate group, but some of it has also gone to independent providers that we are encouraging to get into the cold spots in the city. So where we are seeing the highest rates of young people that are out of education, where do they live and what's available for them. It's still quite early days with that funding, but we've developed a network to work with them and also some of the landlords in the city to map what space might be available and to help them encourage that. That's never going to be big numbers. It's never going to be at the scale of having another college at a local level, but it will help with that re-engagement for the hardest to reach group. And again, how can we then support them to access Luminate provision and university provision that is in the city centre?
Sorry, Chair, I forgot to mention the new Pudsey Sixth Form College, which opens this September, which is part of the Luminate group and provides post-16 A-level and T-level provision to it will eventually to around 600 or 700 people, and it has resulted from the closure of 3 local sixth forms who have come together in partnership to create something that's more efficient and more aspirational. So we're very excited about that. So there are some green shoots.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. I think it is particularly adult reskilling I was thinking about, and it sounds like what you were talking about is about people who are not in employment at the moment and trying to get them into the job market. I was thinking more about enabling an active workforce to reskill for the future and how we can think about doing that more locally without people having to travel. Because if you're in work already, that's probably quite difficult to do that, getting into the city centre.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we do have an opportunity in that through Skills Bootcamp, which is exactly the provision that you were describing about how we can encourage people that are in work to reskill into high growth sectors. And that funding is devolved to the combined authority now, so that adult education funding will go to the combined authority. So we do have the ability to influence how that's spent and where that provision is delivered. It's not always been the easiest fund to manage from the fact that it's a yearly cycle, but we're hopeful that with more devolution we can have a more strategic plan in that place and really address the cold spots and how it's delivered. A lot of that is delivered using hybrid. but we also appreciate that digital delivery isn't always ideal as well, and it's getting that right mix.
Just a follow up from me on the first steps element. How do we help members of the community to overcome that stigma around going back into education if they've had a poor experience of schooling and education earlier in their life course?
It's very much a carrot approach, and I think when it comes to our first step provision and our tailored learning, one of the reasons why we work with the community partners who do an excellent job in this space is because they know their communities best and they know the way to engage them. And that may be not about talking about work and skills. It can be about meeting people with where they're at and encouraging them to engage in provision that interests them. So that might be creative, it might be arts, it might be digital skills for life rather than necessarily work. But then the skills of the providers is building on that engagement and showing them that, look, now you've done this is what you can do next. And we track that very effectively in Leeds, and we work very much with the partners to ensure that they know what are the pathways to work. But we can't underestimate how difficult it is to engage some people that are disengaged. And that's why it is so important that we use the community partners and their knowledge to help us do that.
Thank you. Councillor Hay?
Thank you, and thank you for such a full report. Going back to the figures, 1.9% is essentially full employment by almost any measure. So the cohort of the economically inactive, which is much larger, is obviously somewhere where we should be are focusing. Do we have any provision of work readiness skills? So working with people to develop a regular routine, prepare for what interviews are like, those kind of aspects that people who've not been in the employment market for a while might have. Furthermore, where mental health is the barrier, how are we working with our partners in the health sector to make sure that people have that mental health support that they will need, and that employers understand what that means for them and what adaptations can be made? Because I think it's easy when people have other disabilities, to understand physical changes in the workplace, but perhaps not perhaps cultural changes or work practice changes. So what are we doing around there? And then going on to page 30, where we're talking about showing young people they can make a career here in Leeds, which is laudable, and I know across the country other places struggle with exporting young people and importing old people. I don't, in a growing city like Leeds, feel that's necessarily the issue. But are we exporting young people, or are we importing them from surrounding areas? Because obviously Leeds acts as a magnet for people wanting to enjoy the benefits of living in a great city.
So I'll come in on your first point. Our employment hub has always supported individuals that are looking for work with entry-level skills, and it's very person-centric, and we don't have a customer journey as such, because it depends on the starting point of that individual. But it will address things like looking for work for the first time for some people, understanding their barriers and helping them overcome that. And we will work with people as long as they need to help them make progress towards work. Over recent years, that work has been focused on people that are unemployed, so they are actively looking for work and recognise they need that help. Through the Get Britain Working paper, which was released by government, and some funding which has been devolved to West Yorkshire to help develop that, is allowing us to pivot our activity over the next 12 months to people with health conditions, and therefore pilot some new approaches to help and support people with those provisions. It's still very early days in what that will look like, but it has meant that we do need to work more closely with our ICB colleagues and our health providers to understand the provision that they've got in place and how can we access it and also help the people that we're supporting access it. So very much over the next 12 months, that's what we'll be looking to do. A strand of that work will involve working with our employers as well. Working with the combined authority, we've done a lot of work in listening to our employers and understanding what the barriers might be for them. And some positives have come out of that. Employers tell us that they get this and they want to do better in this space, but they don't know how. So again, we're working with the combined authority as part of the Trailblazer to understand what interventions can we be involved in that will help our employers, and so we can bring those two sides of the world together to achieve better results.
Yes, the right to try, which the government is proposing to introduce, do you think that's going to increase demand from that sector of the economically inactive, in terms of the barrier of loss of benefits will disappear, and therefore they will need that support into finding those opportunities?
The right to try could be quite a powerful tool for us. We already work with a lot of people that want to work, and people that are economically inactive, and a lot of research that's taken place nationally and also regionally has told us that people who are economically inactive want to work. They just don't know how or have the skills to do so. And the right to try will help us with people make what is a massive lifestyle shift for people, and it will allow us to ensure that they can try work and that they do have a safety blanket of financial security if it doesn't work out for them. Transferring into work is a challenge for some people if they've not worked for a long time. It can be a big jump off the diving board, actually, and it can bring lots of complexities. And I think one of the benefits of the support that we're able to offer is that it doesn't start with supporting people just into work. It allows us to continue that support as they transition into work as well, and help them overcome any hurdles that they might come across. So that will be welcomed, and it will be interesting for us to monitor, and we will monitor it very closely, about what impact that has on numbers that are needing our support to ensure that we can offer that to those that want it.
If I come in on your questions about importing and exporting young people, I think the approach that we take in Leeds and through our Employment and Skills Service is really to try and give the people who live here and live in Leeds the best chance of securing those jobs through removing barriers and through the work that Gillian's team do to increase sort of skills and employability. However, Leeds is sort of, we're the region's job engine. We don't just employ people. Our travel to work area is quite wide, actually, so we do draw in people, and that is a function of the fact that we are a core city and we do have those jobs. And we draw not just from West Yorkshire, but North Yorkshire, South Yorkshire and beyond as well. But the work that we do is to help people to be in the best placed in this city as well, to benefit from that strong economy.
Just add a bit to that. If you about 1 in 5 of our students, who are the younger ones, 16 to 18, travel in from outside of Leeds. We can't, and when we've got waiting lists, that's a real issue. We're bursting at the seams for that particular age group, but we can't restrict their access because it's national funding and it's a free market effectively. The only tool that we have or mechanism to ensure that Leeds residents are prioritised is through our bursary that we have, which is where we can target travel to work and support for bus passes and things like that, and restrict it to those that are from further afield, which is what we are doing currently. But yeah.
Thank you. We've got about another probably 7 or 8 minutes on this and 3 more questions. So if we can try and be brief in both questions and answers, I'd be grateful. Councillor Stevenson?
I have 3 minutes, 3 questions. I'll do a minute each, Chair, if that's right. First question is on paragraph 3 of the papers that Councillor Booker referred to the percentages. So they are up to June 24. We're nearly a year on. So what's the current live rate of employment? Has it gone up or down since?
So I think the rates that we put in the paper were the ones that were published at the time. We can have a look to see what is, but that was the current rate that we had included in here. So that was up to June 24. I think this is one of the areas where there are issues with ONS, so the confidence level is not as strong as it can be.
I mean, the paper's published a week ago, and there's more live data than just a year ago, so...
That's fine. I will go back and check on that.
The other point, when it says the UK average stood at 3.7% over the period, where's that lifted from, and what formula are you using to calculate that? I ask because on the ONS's website, there's no figures that I can use that arrive me at 3.7. The average figure is actually 4.1 when you do the average of the sum divided by the count.
So I checked on some of that yesterday. I think some of the figures on ONS look at unemployment as a percentage of the whole of the population, whereas the ones that we have used in here and that we've used, I think, for quite a long time and for years are on the working age population rather than the whole of the population. I will go back and get you a written answer from our analyst around some of this. So we're absolutely sure, rather than trying to answer in the meeting without those figures in front of me.
I thought you'd said that this data was from ONS, but it would probably be helpful in future reports if you could source where you reference it. If you could source it, that would be very helpful.
I will do. They are pulled from ONS figures, though, but I will get the correct place in ONS so I can share them and do the difference, but I'll need to get that from my analyst.
Okay, thank you. And the question I had was about the those that are economically inactive because of health issues, and specifically the reference you made to young people, and those that are in many cases self-declaring things like anxiety as a reason that they cannot work, and where that factors in to the benefit cuts that are coming from the government and reforms. And the question really, I suppose, is to Bill as an educationalist. It's easy and in many cases accurate to point to the pandemic as a root cause of some of those mental health issues that are coming forward in young people, specifically around, if you know, a lot of people working from home now. So if you've left in education and got a new job and it's a work from home job, you're not actually socialising or meeting people, and that in itself creates anxiety to be active in the economy. But do you think, Bill, from an education point of view, what impact does the curriculum content, pedagogy, the fear of critical thinking have on young people in the workplace today? And I put that in the context of, I did a school visit recently, and there was a lesson on climate change, and afterwards the teacher expressed to me that they have to couch some of this with anxiety training as well, and they're having a lot of feedback from students that actually some of the content, not purposefully, but is creating anxiety. I mean, the irony was that the kids are fearful that the world's going to implode in 2050 and completely adverse to the fact that Russia could cut the pipelines tomorrow of the North Sea and completely crumple the economy, and they're not being taught that part. But so what role does education have, and what are we doing in terms of practice to try and meet that in terms of young people going into the workplace rather than putting all the effort in afterwards to correct something?
Well, you're right that there does seem to be an epidemic of anxiety, and we see it increasingly, and it's risen steadily, of people declaring that they have anxiety, they have mental health issues, they need support. So we're educationalists, so we're interested in what has caused that, but we're not experts, and we wouldn't like to speculate without doing the research. However, what we can do is use the resources that we have and use our approach, use our pedagogy, use the curriculum to provide a safe place for people where they feel secure and they can develop confidence. Our curriculum is designed to get people slightly out of their comfort zone so that they develop resilience. And my view is that if you make things too easy all the time and don't challenge people, our approach is high challenge, high support, and you can't be incredibly supportive without also challenging people and getting them, stretching them to the limits of their comfort zone, and that's the development zone and where people grow and develop confidence. And we see the confidence in the people that we take, and we have them for 2 years on average, and they are different people when they leave, but it's a journey. Some of them will be ready at that point for employment and will be hugely confident and thriving and ready to go. Others need a bit longer because they're at a different stage in their journey. Their starting point was different. So that's our approach in a nutshell, I guess, and a lot of support goes towards that.
That's lovely. I love it when the ZPD comes up in Scrutiny. Councillor Ali.
Just a couple of quick questions. Thanks for everything that you're doing, first of all. Carers, what specific support is there for people who have caring responsibilities but want to find employment? Because often they find that they're restricted because of the amount of hours that they can work without losing their carers allowance. So are you noticing employers be a little bit more flexible around offering working shifts and working hours to those kind of people? And shall I go with the second question, or do you want to? Yeah. The second question is around the success. On page 23, it talks about how success is going to be measured. I found that to be a little bit abstract. So will there be some concrete data that shows, for example, this is not a suggestion, but just the type of thing that I'd like to see. So the number of people who have gained a new qualification and then gone on to source employment in that field, and how that breaks down, because earlier on in the report it talks about trying to bring in people from priority neighbourhoods, from disadvantaged backgrounds. So will there be some sort of analysis of people who have come from those backgrounds, gone to source employment in the field that they've actually trained in?
I can attempt to answer that. The first question around, we work with thousands of employers. We've got 2,000 apprentices on various apprenticeships across the city, and we are noticing that because of low unemployment rates, whatever the true figure is, that those employers are very keen to become more flexible than they would have been previously. And there's some really good examples of where we've designed apprenticeships with the employer around the working patterns of those with caring responsibilities, school pickup times, that sort of thing. The best example, I think, of that is the boot repair company, where they've got wonderful job opportunities, which are through apprenticeships, where we do provide the apprenticeship in manufacturing, and that they finish in time for the people to go and collect their children from school, but they're incredibly productive, and it works very well for that employer. So I can only give you anecdotes, but I think that gives you an example of what can be achieved, and it's encouraging employers to see the potential that many people have huge skills and potential if you provide that flexibility.
Yeah, flexible working.
And so if I can just add to that, the carers are very much a priority group for us as well, in that we will look to support through the employment hub and ensure that they get the support to know the art of the possible and what job opportunities are suitable for them, but also reflecting the fact that their caring responsibilities are very real, and we need to meet them where they're at, and they're not necessarily going to go away. So how can we help them access work that works for them and their lifestyles as well? But as Bill says, employer support is key to that, and we really need to amplify that over the next 12 months. And employers tell us they want that support, they want to do the right thing, they need to access this talent pool, and we need to help them do that. So I'll attempt to kind of answer your second question around the data. I think some of it is challenging in regards to, are we able to track that? And not all of that data is available in the public domain, so we need to be able to track that ourselves. A lot of the data that we do track in the Employment Skills Service is because we are primarily externally funded, and we have to track the outcomes that comes with that funding, and that sometimes limits us in what else we can track. But there is an opportunity through some of the pilot programmes that we're going to be running over the next 12 months to dig a little bit deeper into that performance, and we can look at the skills that people have and have gained and the qualifications they have and the job outcomes that they have, and see the alignment on there. But that's not data that's tracked actively in the public domain at the moment that we could report back on now.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Dye.
Thank you. Yep, 3 quick questions on the information that's on page 30. First one is about the apprenticeship awareness sessions. You've got some information on numbers. Is there any data on the impact of those, i.e. young people taking up apprenticeship opportunities? Second one, the hospitality programme that's mentioned with Leeds Hotels and Venues Association, is that going to continue? And third one, on the brokerage service that you mentioned with employers, is there any feedback you can share about the experience of employers who've been part of that, and has that made any difference in terms of their work with young people? Thank you.
In regards to the apprenticeship experiences, we don't track the young people that attend those events and their ultimate outcomes. It is something that has been raised for us before, and it is something that we're looking at as to how can we do that. It's probably something we will need to monitor as an employment and skills team through doing a follow-up. So what are they doing, and an optional follow-up that people are doing after attending these sessions 6 months afterwards. So that's something very much that we can take forward and we can report back on. The hospitality programme, yes, we have committed to that programme for another 12 months. The visitor economy and the hospitality sector engage really well with us on this, and they provide absolutely fantastic opportunities. And we're looking at how we can expand that through things like skills boot camps and qualifications, working with the college, because it is a key sector here in Leeds, and it does provide some fantastic employment opportunities, as well as allowing us to ensure that our young people that access that programme develop some transferable skills, which employers still tell us are incredibly important alongside the technical skills as well. So that programme's important to us because it's not just about the jobs in that sector, but it's about the skills that helps us develop in our young people. In regards to our brokerage, I will take that away and come back with some real examples on there. We do have some case studies that we can share with you and show the impact of some of that work that we're doing. And I think we need to do a better job of that, actually. I think we need to share that more widely, not only to show the impact of the work, but also to show a good example and try and encourage more employers to build into that.
Thank you. I've let that run a little longer than I was planning because that was just such a good discussion. It's so nice to have you guys here to talk on the work that you're doing. I love that in so many of the reports that we get, that team leads approach is really, really embedded. And I think none probably as apparent as this one in terms of you guys working both directly with people to get them into employment, but also working with other partner providers and then also the employers as well. It's a really, really networked paper that's been provided. So thank you very much for that. In terms of the recommendations that have come out from discussions, my understanding is that we are looking to do a letter to ministers about adult education funding. And I wondered as well, looking at Becky, because she'll be able to tell me whether it's acceptable, whether it would be worth offering Mayor Braven the opportunity, because some of the adult education funding is devolved to her as WICA combined authority element, yeah?
We can ask the question.
We can ask the question. Okay, good. And then working with Gillian for myself to talk about the KPIs and what we receive in our performance management. And then to bring on some of the discussions with the care experienced people to potentially next year do a deeper dive into care experience and employability, and perhaps link this to the Children and Families Board around work experience. Does that sound like it captures the discussion? Lovely. Okay, and then there are also the other recommendations that are on the front. So we're asked to endorse progress and agree any appropriate actions that may arise, which I feel like we've done. Excellent. Okay, thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Bill, for coming in from external. That's really wonderful. I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes for a comfort break, and then we'll come back together. Thank you. Annual update on progress. Beginning on page 39 is the annual progress update and presented to the Executive Board on the 12th of March 2025. The Executive report also sought approval for the new Action Plan 2, which outlines the approach for delivering the Connecting Leeds Transport Strategy for the period of 2024 to 2027. The new plan was approved by the Executive Board and is detailed in Appendix 2. Members are asked to provide comment on this report. In receiving this report, the Scrutiny Board will have fulfilled its commitment to receive annual updates in relation to Action Plan 1. And I'll also be seeking views, therefore, from members, at the end of the session about how we want to engage with Action Plan 2, whether we want to maintain our annual updates or whether we want to be a little more targeted. But we'll discuss that at the end. Much of our transport policy work is closely linked to WICA. So thank you very much, Simon, for coming and joining us for this meeting. Gary, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Chair. I think you've covered the main points. We've because the report and the topic covers such a vast array of issues, we thought it'd be useful just to have a very brief presentation. I think it's 5 slides that Kate will take you through, which will draw out some of the successes, but also some of the challenges that we'll face through Action Plan 2 and up to 2030. So I think without further ado, if we can go through the presentation, that might help aid discussions, if that's okay.
Thank you. So just wait for the slides just to come up. As Gary in there, so we thought we'd just pull out some of the pertinent issues. So if you just move on to the next slide, Rupert. So just to pull out what we see as some of the key successes in terms of that first action plan period, you'll see on the screen there a number of photographs of kind of what we've managed to deliver, and really, you know, kind of what it does is it comes to the outcomes of what those have achieved. So in terms of a number of those schemes, for instance, in terms of the closure of the city square, what we've done is removed over 20,000 vehicles that were making trips through that to create really what is an enhanced public realm area where we've been able to host things like the successful Christmas markets. Leeds City Bikes is progressing well. We've had over nearly 19,000 different people use those bikes, and they've made, again, round about 104,000 journeys covering just over 50 kilometres, and we've got plans to expand that further this year. We've obviously now got 3 park and ride sites, and actually last year marked the 10th anniversary of opening the first one at Elland Road in 2014. Over that period, more than 5.6 million journeys have been made, and we estimate that's taken round about 2.5 million cars from travelling into the city centre. We've now got 90 electric buses across Leeds. We've seen increased rail patronage in terms of the footfall now at Leeds Station is over 27 million, which is above pre-pandemic levels. And we're actually seeing that same growth replicated through a number of our more local stations, such as Kirkstall Forge and New Pudsey, where we've seen 20% growth year on year. Up in the far left-hand corner, you'll see the Starship robots that we've now got delivering in 5 different locations. And since that trial began, they've travelled over 42,000 miles. And we estimate that's reduced 23,000 single occupancy car trips. We've spent over 2 million upgrading our traffic signals and adaptive technology, which helps us to better manage traffic flow and prioritise public transport. We do a lot in terms of network management, coordinating what is over 40,000 different works on the carriageway. Companies such as utilities, and that's enabled us through the permitting scheme to secure 3 million that is reinvested in terms of the transport services. Again, we've replaced over 89,000 lamps within street lighting. So again, we've seen energy consumption reduced by 62%. And nearly 30,000 children have received safe and sustainable travel training. And we've now got 17 school streets in operation around the city. So if we just move on to the other one. So what we've seen in terms of actually monitoring and understanding the trends that we've achieved through that first action period, there's a number of graphs and kind of infographics here. We've seen kind of a positive shift in terms of how people are accessing the city centre. So you see there that bus has gone up nearly 3% and rail just over 2%, whereas cars decreased by 4%. So moving in terms of that more sustainable movement. What we've also seen is singular occupancy car trips reduce. And where we've invested in bus priorities such as along the A660 and A647, we've seen significant reduction there in terms of the journey times and congestion. We've now got 80,000 EV registrations that took part in 24, and we've got 548 electric charge points. So we're seeing an increase in terms of that availability across the city. And actually what we're also seeing is a positive direction in terms of our collision data and the casualties there. What we've seen is, although there was an increasing trend post-COVID, just because obviously there was less traffic on the roads during that time, we're now seeing a decrease in those KSIs between 2022 and 23, which is really positive in terms of in line with what we've been doing around Vision Zero. I think it's not all positive, and I think, you know, it has to be acknowledged. It has been a really challenging time period as we try to understand the post-COVID travel behaviours and what is happening now in terms of how people choose to travel when they work from home, move forward. So actually we've seen an increase in the vehicular kilometres per annum, although it is still below pre-COVID numbers from 2019. And I think what we've seen is a noticeable increase in LGV kilometres, I think reflective in terms of that rise in e-commerce. Although CO2 levels, are steadily rising, they're still lower than 2019. But you'll see in terms of that graph on the right-hand side, that still means that there is a significant way to go in terms of if we want to achieve our net zero objectives. So if we just move on in terms of, so what that means in terms of what we've put in our action plan period in terms of moving towards that more sustainable and that net zero element of it. So we've got a wide range of transport programmes, safety measures and new infrastructure plans. A key element of this action period is obviously moving through bus reform into the franchising and that work ongoing around mass transit, which will have a significant impact, I think, in terms of that offer for the travelling public. The final piece of the city centre major works around the Leeds Station Gateway will be completed in 2026. And I think that will make a huge difference in terms of that area around there, which will include secure parking for 700 bikes. We've got a number of infrastructure schemes that are continuing that rollout of schemes. We've got funding through CRSTS1, which includes the Leeds City Links, work around Armley Town Street, Woodhouse Lane Gateway, with the view that all of those will be delivered before March 2027, which is the cut-off period for CRSTS1. And what that will deliver is improved bus journey times, bus lanes, segregated cycle tracks, wider pavements, enhanced pedestrian crossings and green space. And I think that then helps us to move in terms of that position that we'd like to be, where everybody has a viable alternative to the private car. In terms of what that then is translating in terms of the work that we need to do around that, is that there is still that need to develop more robust and kind of policy that takes us further, given where we are on the trajectory around net zero. and we're working very much in partnership with the combined authority in terms of LTP4, which will be a key document in terms of setting those policies. And I think what we're doing as well as that high level policy and strategy, that means that we're looking at the things that directly influence in terms of what's our strategy around parking management, cycle, taxis and private hire vehicles, that curbside management, the role that freight has, future mobility, and actually how we relocate the road space that we've got. I think we need to look at kind of what needs to be done around local revenue generation, particularly in the context of supporting things like mass transit. There will be an expectation around a local contribution. So we will be looking at the options, so including the potential for workplace levy, lane rental, operational licensing, and also looking at what else can be done across the different districts for all of our programmes. I think in summary, we feel, we've adopted an ambitious plan, and although progress is made, we accept that we need to be bolder in our approach to achieve shared goals and ambitions. We recognise that as Leeds City Council, we can't achieve that in isolation, and it's very much dependent on the work that is ongoing in partnership with the combined authority. We recognise funding is a key issue in terms of that, and obviously we need the national policies that come down from central government as well to assist in that. As I said, funding continues to be one of our greatest challenges. There's continued cost inflation, instability in the marketplace. I think, we're seeing some of our schemes are costing twice as much to deliver as they did pre-COVID. So I think that just gives a bit of a context in terms of the key things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm grateful that you put a slide in about the successes. When I read the report, the detail on the successes was quite astounding. I can't quite believe that that's been achieved in 3 years, to be honest. And actually the impact on me personally, I will still, currently my car's still in the garage, but when I get my car back, I would still use the bus network to get to work if I'm in the city centre, because it has just become so quick on some of those routes that we've had a real impact on. Simon, before I move to questions, is there anything you wanted to add?
Really just to echo Kate's words earlier, and we continue to work in partnership with colleagues at Leeds in the development of our local transport plan at the moment. That's quite key for us. We're planning to adopt that in the spring of next year, and we're working hard to ensure that the policy framework and the priorities that defines align very closely with our partner councils in terms of their transport strategies that they've developed. I think that will also be key in terms of identifying what our funding priorities are for the forthcoming 5-year funding periods. So we'll be continuing to work with Kate and the team over the coming months to kind of establish what those priorities should be.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got several questions, but I'll be brief with them. But they're all on the workplace parking levy. So, the financing of mass transit should surely be a completely different matter. This should be a matter for private enterprise, the government, and whoever. But it shouldn't be entirely dependent on the private sector. A workplace parking levy levied like this at this time, is it going to make people more likely or less likely to locate in Leeds? If somebody is thinking of locating to the north of England, an office or something like that, are they more likely to come to Leeds or, say, Harrogate, for instance? £2,000 per parking space. I'd like you to confirm that that figure is right, based on your expected revenue generation of £15 to £25 million. Would it apply to Leeds City Council for this car park out here, which would cost £100,000? Would it apply to the universities? And is this going to conceivably apply to all West Yorkshire towns and cities, or simply Leeds? Why should we pay for a West Yorkshire mass transit scheme simply by using the private sector in Leeds? And finally, Chair, Nottingham, I gave you an opportunity to address this issue by saying Nottingham have suffered the worst fall in actual earnings of 8.6% in the last few years. And what do we know? Oh yes, Nottingham is the only city with a workplace parking levy. Thank you, Chair.
Correlation or causation? Officers, you have to come back in.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't want to get into macroeconomics in relation to the last one, but in easy terms, I think all we would say is that all we asked the Executive Board was for permission, if you like, to do further work, to have consultations and discussions with key partners, colleagues, members, anybody who wants to comment on it, to enable us to develop up something over the next months and years, subject to us being asked, as we are asked now, in terms of all our major schemes, for a local contribution to be applied. And highly likely that mass transit will require a local contribution of some sorts. If there's another way of it being funded, we will push for that, and we will explore all avenues, and there is a work stream that will assist with that. But these things, these schemes, these proposals take many years to come to fruition, and all we've done at this stage is started the process at a very early stage to have further discussions with the city, in effect, and try to answer many of the questions that Councillor Buckley has posed. So we don't have all the answers yet. We've just started the process.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ali.
My apologies, Chair. Kate, you've highlighted a couple of points here regarding ambitious plan and bolder going forward. You talked about improved times for bus and cycles. A week ago, I dropped my daughter off at the train station, and I regretted that journey. It took me 45 minutes to get back out city centre. I've worked over 36 years in city centre. You've said that you've upgraded the traffic flow in the city centre with a tune of 2 million. I personally believe you made it harder for people to get around the city centre independently. Okay? You've talked about the travel. Choose to travel by bus, or are they made to travel by bus? What impact does that have with people with disabilities? I am a disabled person, and I regret actually coming into the city centre, and I've worked 36 years in the city centre. I cannot get into the city centre without my car. So you've talked about how around the COVID level of people in the city centre. So they've not returned. So have we driven those people away? There's quite a few questions here. You've talked about the bus times improving. Have you been on Claypit Lane recently? Those lights there, just here at the Merrion House, let 2 people pass. The queue goes all the way down to Sheepscare, beyond Chapeltown. You've improved the bus times, I respect that, but what have you done for people that have disabilities? They need to get to work on time, and I'm not talking peak time. I normally get into the city centre 4 a.m. Okay? Those lights, or the system around the city, it's not fit for purpose. Over to you.
So if I just try and kind of pick up on a number of those things, I think, you know, we recognise that access to the station at the current time is challenging. It's associated with the works that are ongoing in terms of the station gateway. Some of that is outside our control because it sits in Network Rail land. We've tried to do as much as we can in terms of facilitating access, but I think we recognise it's challenging at the moment, and it will be until we finish the scheme as it is. And so I think, you know, kind of that we've done as much as we possibly can. I think in terms of the rationale is, as we take vehicles and put them onto public transport, that the remaining road space is used for those individuals that most need it, such as yourselves, in terms of those people that need their car, that don't have that viable alternative. And so as more people move on to public transport, and the whole element around road space reallocation is that it will make it easier for those people that need to use their car. I think we are still going through a transition period as part of that. I think that, you know, it's always a difficult balance between the different elements of it. And we recognise as we change the network around the city that sometimes there are teething problems as we need to just get the balance right. But I think, you know, and again, when we look at schemes and design those, it is always really important that we ensure that there is accessibility for blue badge holders, that we retain an element of parking for those. So I would also welcome if you want to come and talk to some of the team to understand some of the challenges that you've got and where maybe there are the alternative routes for you and parking, then more than happy for you to reach out and speak to the team that do the planning around that.
So Kate, I'm not looking at me as an individual, I'm looking at this as a city, and you've said that you've got an ambitious plan and a bolder plan. What is in place at this present moment in time is not fit for purpose. I don't want to be disrespectful. As a disabled person that has worked in the city centre for 36 years. Before this, we had Luminate College here, and they were looking at inactive young people with health conditions. There's 36,000 something, or 32,600. And we are moving all colleges from outside into city centre. Okay? So if they cannot get independently, if they can't use the public transport and cannot get into, I'm trying to understand why this was not looked at beforehand. You've asked me to come and sit with the team and look at these things. They should have been looked at way before. And we know that these numbers have not gone back to pre-COVID. Why haven't they gone back? Why has people's habits have changed? Is it because of COVID, or is it because of the systems that we have implemented? I go back to the train station. You know, the land at the station is nothing to do with council. That's fine. But if you look at how to get in and come out, Armley Geriatry is a prime example at this present moment in time. If you try to get out of city centre, a Bradford journey would have been half an hour. You are stuck for at least an hour and 15 minutes. That traffic is going through Burley, Kirkstall, over the bridge, Canal Road, and cutting that way now, rather than going this way through. So that journey around there, especially around Burley Road, Kirkstall Road, is a gridlock on an evening. Those are things that should have been taken into account way before. I'd love to sit down with individuals and have a chat, but this does not mean that I, as Asghar Ali or Councillor Asghar Ali, has affected. I want people to look at the wider disabled community, people with needs for cars that is impacting. And I, as an elected member, I'm telling you that I have been working this is my 36th year in city centre, and the impact you are having, people with disabilities working in the city centre, is phenomenal.
Councillor Ali, I think it's probably unfair to say it hasn't been looked at all. Just on behalf of officers, I think that's probably unfair, and I wonder if it would also be useful for you to speak to Councillor Ritchie. He does a huge amount of work as disability champion, and he has, I'm sure, engaged with the transport planning system as well. Officers, did you want to come in as well?
Not necessarily on the detail, but I think it's a really interesting comment and commentary, because as a city we are faced with these challenges, and unfettered access to city centres is just not achievable, and so we do need to manage traffic and how people move about the city very carefully. And so a decision was taken to make sure that people that are able to can use buses, public transport, and cycle and walk. But for those, the system that's been designed, if people need to get into the city centre for whatever reason, it could be business, it could be because they're disabled, or for other reasons, there is a way to get in. Now, on some routes, that may be a bit more convoluted and a bit longer than it used to be, but there are good reasons for that in terms of, if we look at City Square, for example, I think, if I remember rightly, over a third of the traffic that was driving through City Square was through traffic. It had no reason to be in City Square, it was just driving through. So if you remember what City Square was like, certainly as a pedestrian, in some places 4 lanes of traffic, some of it speeding through, quite hostile. And I do remember Councillor Lewis saying in public meetings about how polluted Neville Street, obviously leading into City Square, was. Again, I forget the exact comparison, but it certainly was one of the most polluted streets in the city, in the region, and if not nationally as well. But that is now much improved. So as a City Council, the strategy that went to Executive Board, I think it was October 21, was approved, taking all that into account. And it is a fact, and we have it on a daily basis as officers. How do we use the curb space for taxi ranks, bus stops, no waiting, and other uses? And there is only so much space. It's finite, and there's huge demand for it. So we try and balance it off, as Kate has said. But hopefully that gives a bit of background.
Members, the first 2 questions have been quite long, so if we can be a bit briefer now so that we can get everyone in, because I've got an awful lot of indications. Councillor Miller?
I will be brief, but I do have 2 questions. Great to see so many achievements, and that nearly half of the measures in action plan would have been completed. And obviously, we've touched on some of the achievements already. In terms of the 14% of things that have been paused or cancelled, there's a reference that a lot of that is due to broader strategic changes at both local and national levels. I was wondering if you could touch on what those changes are. And then second question is about the Starship technology. Obviously, we've had this in lots of places across the city, including the ward I represent, since 2022, and it's been labelled as a trial during that period. And I was just wondering, do we know if there's a potential that it could be made permanent, why it's still labelled as a trial, and just kind of understanding, because obviously residents might be confused why it's such a long trial period. Thanks.
So I'll pick up the second element of it, and my colleague can speak about the detail of the ones that have been stopped. So the reason it's a trial is because we are still waiting for guidance from DfT around the legislation under which they will operate. So at the current time, we have to operate it as a trial because of that. So we continue to work with DfT to get some confirmation around that. So hopefully that answers that. Rupert, you able to just explain about the...
I think in terms of the 14%, the vast majority are due to funding and lack of funding to achieve the complete goals all the way through. And then when we're looking at whether those then fit into our new transport strategy in terms of multi-storey car parks and things like that in certain areas, how that's changed and reflects what's happening with the LTP4, some of them have been stopped. Most of them are being reviewed and are carried on into Action Plan 2, whether they be wider policy developments which don't really have a finite end date. They'll work all the way through. And Action Plan 2 is very much focused on developing the policy and overarching guidelines to support these changes. We've probably spent more time delivering the infrastructure, as you've seen from the fantastic successes we've had in Action Plan 1, and now we're looking at delivering those measures to support greater change.
Thank you. Councillor Shazad?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Just a few questions, and I'll keep them brief. On Table 6, it shows obviously car usage is going up again. Is that because now less people are working from home? Because obviously a lot of the companies are asking people to get back into work. So does that mean people, instead of using public transport, are using their own private cars to get back into work? We've had a lot of investment in the cycle infrastructure, but are we getting value for money? I mean, obviously we had a peak around 2023, 2022, but does that mean that was during the COVID time and now suddenly cycling is not in anymore, but we've had all this investment in the cycle infrastructure, so are we actually getting value for money? And on top of that, again, walking is reduced, and there's been so many projects and things that have been done to try and make walking safer, better, easier. But again, that's trending downwards as well in 2024. So what is the reason, after all this investment, we're not getting the improvements that we should be getting? So are we really getting value for money for our residents and for the schemes that we're actually implementing? And the second point is the train station, connectivity. A lot of people from the north, that'll be from Alwoodley, Moortown, other areas, Chapel, the connectivity to the train station on public transport is just not possible. There's a lot of walking, and especially not going over the disabled question that Councillor Ali asked, but people with disabilities who want to use the public transport, then they have a problem getting to the train station because they've got mobility issues and other issues. So overall, I like the plan at the train station. I can understand why you've taken the traffic out from City Square, but instead of Neville Street, it seems like the pollution has moved, and I've always asked for these figures of what is the pollution levels now on Eyre Street, because that's where all the traffic has moved to instead of Neville Street. I know we've got rid of 20,000 cars that were cutting through, but we need to kind of have some sort of answers to that and some sort of connectivity, because it seems like there's only one route in, one route out, and there's a lot of people that come from other ends of the city, not just from Kirkstall or from Beeston or Hunslet and those areas. Is how do we get to the train station if you're coming from Alwoodley, Moortown and other places, and Crossgates and Winmore? It has really increased the journey time for a lot of people, especially if they're having to use cars and they can't use public transport. I'll leave you at that, even though I've got more questions.
So if I take the one in terms of the trends, I think what we saw last year was that there was a lot of roadworks going, a lot of kind of changing travel behaviours, and obviously the surveys are done at a point in time. I think the other thing we had last year was a very extended period of really poor weather, and we saw that in terms of the use of the e-bikes as well. So I think that often it's better to look at longer trends in terms of over the period. So maybe, you know, we might have seen a slight decline over last year, but I think there were exceptional circumstances in terms of that. I think when we get feedback in terms of the schemes that we have done, people that are walking and cycling certainly feel less vulnerable because of that protection. I think significantly what we've seen is a decrease in cycle casualties, which are disproportionately high at the current time in terms of the volume of cyclists. So I think, you know, as we deliver a connected network, I think we will start to see the benefits of that coming through. We touched a little bit in terms of the station. I think obviously Eyre Street at the moment is compounded because we've got bus replacement services there as part of the Transpennine upgrade. When the work is complete, obviously Bishopgate, there will be the ability to put the taxis back there and better access. So again, I think things are compounded at the moment because of the way that the work is going. When we finish the scheme that's on the ground at the moment, when the Transpennine upgrade works are completed, it will be a very different picture around the station, but appreciate it's challenging in the short term.
Thank you. I think if I can ask anyone with further questions to hold off on stuff around the train station, because I feel like we're going to end up in a deep hole around the train station, and it's a massive paper. But what we'll do is we'll look at potentially having a station update. We'll discuss that at the recommendations element later. Councillor Haig?
Thank you, Chair. Just an anecdote to make for Scrutiny, but I was speaking to a resident this weekend who said how delighted they were with the work around City Square because it made it so much better for pedestrians. So I think we're always looking at, competing needs from different road users. This relates to Leeds Dock and its connectivity to the station and that part of the city. We're seeing increasing numbers of people living there, and there was a highly unflattering article in The Economist in February about Leeds and its infrastructure, but specifically talking about that link into Leeds Dock. There is no bus service. The only public transport available is the wonderful taxis, but they don't run frequently enough or reliably enough. They start 10 till 6, I think they are, and they're more expensive than the buses. So what are we going to do about increasing connectivity from the south of the river, where we've got huge amounts of development and people living there, into the city centre when you actually can't get from there beyond Leeds bus station?
I think this is part of one of the challenges that we face, because there are walking links, aren't there, from Leeds Dock. Some of us will be at UK Reef in the not too distant future, and we'll be walking to and fro all the time. It's probably not ideal in some places, and I can accept at night time not great. Lack of bus services, I get that as well in terms of, and I think that's an issue for us to work with the combined authority in the world of bus franchising to take into account these developments that are coming forward. And Kate's colleagues in Transport Development Services will make sure that there are due regard given to public transport access when those developments come forward. And certainly the improvements that we've seen on the A61 coming into the city centre for buses are very high quality now, but I appreciate that they might be a little distant away and not ideal. But what we're saying in this report, there's still a lot to do. We believe we've achieved a lot in 3 years, but there's a lot more to do, and the things that you're touching on are part of that process.
Simon, I just wondered if you wanted to come in on that around the WICA stuff.
Sure, yeah. So, as Gary alludes to, the opportunity afforded to the combined authority and the franchising will be such that we can assess the suitability of the network and identify opportunities for its expansion where appropriate. I think the other thing just to note as well, whilst not explicit to Leeds Dock, but south of the river more generally, is our mass transit proposals and the route of the proposed South Leeds line. So we're currently reflecting on the consultation feedback from the consultation that was held towards the end of last year. And we're working towards our preferred route, and we'll be consulting on that preferred route early next year. But suffice to say that route will be improving connectivity for some South Leeds communities into the city centre and beyond.
Thank you. Councillor Scopes?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for this report. I just wanted to talk a little bit about bike routes and bike lanes. So broadly, I'm very supportive for bike lanes, and I cycle myself. Just a few things. What I'd be interested in is some kind of audit of the cycle network, and in particular I'm thinking about actually cycling along them. And I think if you do that, you'll find there's bits that aren't joined together. For example, you can go to out of the city centre towards Dewsbury Road, and there's a little bit of the Dewsbury Road cycle path where it sort of just disappears a bit, and I think that's a real issue because it just means it's less usable. And I think getting from having a good thing for like hyper-local journeys to being able to do longer journeys through the city centre, that'd be very through the city would be good. And I think there's just something also around having a well-articulated view about how you get around bus stops and how and when bike lanes take priority over road users and how and when road users take priority over bikes. So, for example, when I cycled in this morning, I was coming up Whitehall Road. There's a lot of roadworks on there, it's fair enough at the moment, and that's not your fault. But as I was coming along the bike lane, when it became a segregated lane, there was a car waiting to go into an underground car park, and it's just parked across the bike lane, which, again, isn't your fault. But I think there's something around how do we communicate better and sign better to road users about whose priority is when, etc., etc. I think the second thing on bike lanes is around works when they're being repaired or fixed. I think there's a whole bunch of rules about the signage you need when you're fixing a highway which don't apply to bike lanes. So you can be cycling down a bike lane and then suddenly have by the way, it's closed here, and it's not necessarily easy to get back into the traffic. So I think that's an important thing. And the third thing I think we need to think about is secure lock-in facilities for push bikes in the city centre. So I read this morning, and I haven't fact-checked this, but there's 1,000 bike thefts in Leeds last year. And then if you compare that to the number of bike journeys that are in the report, it's pretty high. So my guess is you'd only cycle to work or cycle to city centre if you have a secure work facility to lock it up in. So I wouldn't, in my last job I locked it in the basement car park. Now I bring it into the Civic Hall. I wouldn't lock my bike outside the station even though I have a relatively decent lock, because I'd be worried about it not being there when I come back. And so I think those are three things I think could be done to improve the usage of the cycle lanes. Thank you.
Sorry, we're fighting over who to answer. So in terms of, I think you'd be pleased to know, in terms of that piece of Dewsbury Road that's missing, we have got proposals to go and join that up. Often the challenge is funding in terms of that. I think with Active Travel England now being kind of a part of the process, we do end-to-end audits as part of this, and we pick up what we call critical fail locations. So within the envelope of funding that we've got, we try really hard to ensure that we've got that end-to-end provision. I can certainly take away in terms of when we're fixing the bike lanes, you know, that's in our gift. If it's our depots, we can ensure that they're doing the appropriate signing. Obviously, under the station gateway proposals, there's 700 secure spaces there. When we get planning applications from developers, we will ensure that they incorporate secure parking in as part of that. I think the work that we have been doing in the city centre around some of the challenges that we've had with the e-bike scheme links again in terms of what you've said around kind of the bike thefts, and we work very closely, I think, with Leeds Watch and the other organisations in terms of obviously addressing what is, as you rightly say, you know, a significant issue in terms of kind of the level of current theft.
And maybe just pick up one that Kate didn't quite finish off. The driver behaviour one, in terms of people parking, yeah, that's a good one. And you've probably heard me talk about Vision Zero and killed and seriously injured, and driver behaviour we need to change. And it's the same with this. It's about general behaviour on the highway. It's just common sense, isn't it, not to block an access, but it happens all the time. And just building on what Kate was saying, if we go back many years, when funding was very, very limited, we did do the easier links when it comes to cycling. And what's happened over recent years is we've tried to finish off those missing links, if we can call them that, and particularly the difficult ones, and those really relate to the ones in the city centre. So that's why in recent times we've had a real concentrated effort around the city centre to complete those links from further out. But as I keep saying this morning, there's a lot more to do, and that we're not finished yet, hopefully.
Councillor Dye.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Really interesting reading. The successes are fabulous, and it's really good to see them. And I liked them showcased on the slide. I think that's really positive. Against that is the real worrying graph of emissions, and that's something that clearly we have to move that, don't we, significantly, and that's going to take an awful lot of work, not just in transport, but that is clearly one of the key issues. I think it's around about a third of our emissions as a city. So it's good to see that there is recognition of the need for more ambitious action there. In terms of questions, the bikes, I know there are plans to extend it. How far have you thought in terms of extending the geography, the kind of the circumference of where you can pick one up? The EV trials, so the bit in the report about the mobility hub is really exciting, and it'd be interesting to keep an eye on that as certainly as a scrutiny board, and where does that go in terms of extending plans across the city. But I know in the past we've had EV trials for works vehicles, haven't we? And I think quite a lot of success in terms of convincing people who perhaps didn't think it would work for their business to look at it as a viable option. So is there any possibility of more of that? And then probably just for us as a board, the robots, whether we can do anything in terms of a letter to DFT or something. I listened to a really interesting radio programme by the CEO of Starship, and saying that where they were really successful, the countries they were really successful in, had a clear policy, and we lack that as a country. And then just to go back to the other thing, I won't ask my question about bus and rail links, but when we do the update, it would be really good to look specifically at that. So in terms of people who want to use the bus to get on a train, how can we make that easier? Thank you.
Just be mindful of time. What I'm going to do is bring all the other questions in, because I've got two more councillors, and then you can answer them in the round if that's okay. So Councillor Alley and then Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. On page 44, it mentioned that light goods vehicles have been increased by 5.9% compared to 2019. I know you mentioned that it was mainly down to e-commerce, but my question is more specific around waste carriers, so scrap metal vans and that kind of thing. How much of that figure is made up by people doing that kind of business, and is there, because what we often find, especially in my ward, is that a lot of those vans are untaxed, uninsured, they don't carry the proper license. So is there scope to work with teams with cleaner neighbourhoods to work more on seizing those vans and getting them off the roads? There was one other question. So driver behaviour on page 119, it says that driver behaviour is taking a turn for the worse. So what's the data that supports that? And we've seen over the last few years that there's been a lot of investment in road safety measures. So why have those road safety measures not correlated to a decrease in traffic collisions and fatalities and injuries, etc.? Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Far be it from me to contradict the chief officer for highways, but the causal impact of a parking levy would be microeconomics, not macroeconomics, as a side point. But the two questions I really had was, at present, if I'm pleased to hear that your bus journey is so successful, Chair, but if I want to get from Linton in my my ward into Civic Hall, that's currently an hour's bus journey, and then I have to walk from the bus stop up to Civic Hall. When I jump in my car, it's 32 minutes on average to get here. So clearly, I'm not going to take the bus if it's easier to drive. So in all of your plans you've set out, how is that going to change for my residents in Linton and wider in the Harewood ward? And secondly, on the Starship technology robot things, I just wonder, whilst we've measured the journeys, the reduction of car journeys, are we measuring wider economic impacts? When you look at these things, they're about so big, you can't do your weekly shop in them. I'm suspecting what's happening is people are sat on their couches ordering their King's to pasties and bottle of pop or something, and paying extra for the privilege. What they're not doing is going to the shop and the supermarket, and whilst they're there, calling at the other shops on the high street and spending. So what's the negative economic impact of having these things roaming around?
Hopefully I've captured everything. So in terms of the e-bike scheme, the plan at the moment is to consolidate on the area that we've got. There's a few more additional ones within the scope of the geographic area. Is to stabilise that, to get the ridership in terms of that, and then when that is in a position that we've got a commercially viable operating scheme in terms of the ridership levels have stabilised and they're at the level, we would then look in terms of, is there an opportunity to expand that into different geographic locations. In terms of the mobility hubs, that's something very much that we're delivering in partnership with WICA. So if I pass to Simon at the end, maybe if you want to pick up any of those. In terms of the robots, would really welcome any support that you can give as a collective in terms of DFT. I'm not aware that we have the data around the potential negative impact of that, but we can certainly go back and ask the question, because we work very, very closely with Starship around that. In terms of the data that we collect around light goods vehicle, it doesn't differentiate in terms of the types of light vehicles, so we wouldn't have that detail in terms of the specifics around the scrap metal element of it. And actually the legislation of that sits out with the function that we have as highways and transportation. I'll maybe get Gary to come in around the road safety element of it, and then Simon, the bus journey thing around Linton.
Okay, in terms of the road safety element, we are, some of the data for 2024 in particular is yet to be ratified by the police, but we are seeing, I think I've reported in the detailed scrutiny that we have on such things, the green shoots of a positive impact in terms of our work on Vision Zero. Looking like we are arresting the increase in KSIs, maybe even seeing a decrease. But until we see the ratified figures, we're just being cautious with that at the moment. So, and that is booking a trend. If it's true, it's booking a trend, certainly regionally and possibly nationally, which will be very encouraging. But I think the difficulty and the challenges associated with that agenda were brought home to bear last week, when members will probably be familiar with that or saw it, that bus crash in, it was in Rothwell, wasn't it? Where the bus went into the house after, I think, a collision with a van, and 8 people were injured and taken to hospital. So you can see some of this is very challenging indeed. And just touching on Councillor Stevenson's comments about bus and car, just elevating that one really in terms of inevitably there are going to be some locations and some reasons where the car will be better, and we are not anti-car, and where it makes sense to use your car, maybe for shopping, multiple bags, whatever, public transport's probably not the best thing to do, or the journey by car will be shorter, then that should still be available, and that's behind the strategy. It's just that, as I said earlier, sometimes when you get closer into the city centre, you might have to take a different route, which might be a bit longer than it was before. But you still should be able to access the part of the city that you need to. And just before I forget, one member asked earlier or made a comment about Army Gyratory. That work should be finishing and clear in May. So at least I can finish on a high note.
Simon?
So, anyway, 2 points, just one about mobility hubs and one around rural bus services. So in terms of mobility hubs are a new concept. There are some working examples nationally, but we don't currently have any within our region. We're particularly excited about the pilot phase that we're currently working through, and there is plans for a pilot mobility hub in Otley. The principle behind mobility hubs is really to make it easier for people to interchange between shared modes, so effectively extending the reach of where people can get to when they're travelling by those modes. We're particularly keen through the pilot to understand how effective some of those measures are likely to be. So in Otley, we're looking at how users can make use of EV car share vehicles. We're also looking at shared bike hire, which will be a slightly different model to the Leeds City Bikes scheme you see in the city centre, given Otley's market town characteristics. The intent from this first pilot phase is to understand what works, where we might need to change our operating model, and then that will inform a wider rollout across the region in due course. So we're really keen to see the findings from that initial pilot, because that will shape our forward investment plan. In terms of rural bus services, as Gary says, it's not always going to be practical to provide public transport in every location. And I can't speak specifically for the service in question in Linton, but in principle, one of the reasons why the Mayor took the decision to franchise local bus services was because it was felt that it would provide greater opportunity for us to subsidise services in less commercially competitive locations. So currently, members will be aware that the Combined Authority only funds a very small proportion of services, socially necessary services that operators don't operate on a commercial basis. Any profits from more commercially viable services are deployed at the operator's discretion. The Combined Authority is of the view that the ability for us to control those commercial returns and direct them to a wider range of services is going to be advantageous for the travelling public. And whilst we're still yet to make the decisions about where the network has the opportunities to expand, I think the principle of improving connectivity for a greater range of communities stands to be gained.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And with that, what I'm going to do is just take a little sum up of the sort of recommendations stuff that we've got. So our sort of official recommendations are not on that page. Are to provide comment on the contents of the Connecting Leeds Transport Strategy Annual Progress Report, which we've done. Identify any areas where the Scrutiny Board may wish to conduct further scrutiny, and consider whether they want to continue to receive updates on this basis for the period of Action Plan 2. So B and C, I guess my suggestion would be, because there is just so much in the report, that actually it would be better for us to have almost a pick-a-mix element and have a bit more detail on less things, so that we can do more scrutiny on the bits that you guys have clearly shown interest in today. So the three things, well, there's four things that have kind of come from the discussion. I wonder whether having some further info next year on the workplace levy would be good, and where we're up to in terms of that research element. We've brought up, and it's been brought up by you in your one-to-ones as well, that value of the cycle infrastructure, how much it's used, whether active transport is working, and then the station update. They're the three things that it feels like could come back next year. I'm seeing nods from officers, which is good. In terms of the letter to the Minister about Starship, I'm super happy to do that, but I would have no idea what we need to include. So it would be good for officers perhaps to give us a bit of a steer on what would be useful. In terms of the climate and emission comments, we had a couple of those. I would suggest that goes kind of with you to see at, Councillor Dye. But when it comes onto your agenda, if you'd like me to attend on behalf of the Scrutiny Board, I'd be really happy to do that. And finally, Vision Zero has been mentioned a few times, and it's another opportunity for me to remind you all that on April 22nd we've got our Vision Zero working group. So make sure that you attend if you can, and please remember to let us know via the diary entry whether you can make it. Does that sound reasonable in terms of moving forward on that basis? And I guess just a vote so that I'm really sure on either yes to what I've just suggested, no, you want to have the whole thing come back, third option, something else. And before I do that, Shazaz?
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Just a quick one. Can we have disability access into the city centre, and especially people with blue badges parking? That's an issue that's really come up with a lot of residents, which has not been taken. And I think that's something that, if you could look at, would be really appreciated. And as with the train station, can it have connectivity? I think Councillor Dye mentioned that as well. Great stuff. Thank you. Sorry, Chair.
In terms of the disabled badge parking, there's remit, not our remit, is the question I'm asking.
You can look at it from an infrastructure perspective, but you might want to seek some input from EHC, who have the equalities agenda. So there just might be some crossover, but nothing that would be insurmountable.
So just for the benefit of the folk watching online that might not have heard that, there is each Scrutiny Board has a remit that it has to work within, and the equalities remit is within environment, health and housing and communities, and we have infrastructure. So there would potentially be some crossover there. So it may require some joint working in order to do, but there's no reason why that can't be done or achieved. Wonderful. So the votes are: vote 1 is yes, you want to go with what I've suggested. Vote 2 is no, you want the full paper to come back again. And vote 3 is you want something completely different. So all those for 1? Great, that's unanimous. I wish I'd not bothered with the others. Although that's not democracy, so... Okay, perfect. And then what we'll do is I'll make a suggestion to the successor board via Becky that next year they do the same thing and come up with a few from the executive board paper, because it will still, I guess, be going to executive board, and therefore there'll still be that option to pick what you want. That might form part of, if you do one-to-ones next year, that might be part of the homework beforehand. Okay, wonderful. And with that, we've got the end of year statement. Officers, if you want to go and not listen to this, you are more than welcome. So we've got the annual report, and in that there is a end of year statement from the Scrutiny Board. It provides details of the full work programme for each of us, and it links to the associated agenda packs, minutes, webcast recording, so folk can deep dive on the work that we've done. And it also, of course, includes a statement from me as chair. It's appended to this report. Does anyone have any comments on it? Are we all comfortable that it's a fair reflection on the good work we've done this year? Yeah, we're all happy? Good, okay. And therefore the next meeting is going to be in the next municipal year. This is it. This is the final one this municipal year. So the next meeting will be at 10 a.m. because we wanted to move it earlier, so we're making the suggestion that's what happens on the 11th of June, and there'll be a pre-meeting for all members of Scrutiny at 9:30, at which we'll decide whether or not we want to do the abbreviated. I say we, it might not be me as chair. It will be decided by somebody whether they want to do a 15-minute. Yes.
Well, I was just going to take the opportunity to thank you for being the chair this past year. I think it's worth pointing out, obviously it's your first year doing it. I think you've done a great job.
We would like you back, Chair.
Then you better vote for me. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much for that. That was lovely. And with that, I'll close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.